With this, let us move to the fourth objective of investment, that is safety. And I always open and probably close with this beautiful saying by Warren Buffett. The first rule of investment is do not lose. And the second rule is do not forget the first rule. And that's all the rules there are. The remarkable thing in these three sentences is the third sentence. That's all the rules there are. Ensure that your investments have a high amount of safety. You don't have to worry about everything. If some other author has written somewhere, don't worry about returns. First worry about risk. If risk comes to zero, what are left are returns. You will get the returns. Okay? Focus more on risk and risk management. So, from our point of view as students of investment, I too am nothing more than a student of investment. Any student of investment has to understand the true meaning of risk in order to then move to safety. What is risk? Risk can be the possibility of financial loss. This is what a good deal of textbooks say. It's not wrong. It's not wrong. But it does not convey the full meaning. Risk has three aspects to it: uncertainty, danger, damage. If all three are present, it is risk. To give you an example, Wimbledon is going on. I think women's finals today, if I'm not mistaken, and men's maybe tomorrow. You know the two players. You are sitting, it's a weekend, you are sitting and watching the final. But the first game also has not started. The players are just warming up. You are watching with a friend. You believe that player A will win. Your friend believes that player B will win. Both of you are well versed in tennis. You have done your own analysis. But your conclusions differ. Now you get into a friendly argument. And then both of you are so certain about your candidate. You now put a bet. 100 rupee bet. Now let us examine the situation. You may believe that A will win. Your friend may believe that B will win. And your belief may be on correct and rational analysis. But the fact remains that until match point is decided, or in this case tournament point is decided, you do not know who will win. Upsets have kept on taking place. Federer also is gone. So, you cannot conclude who will win. Some total outsider may win. It's on that day what happens. Now the 100 rupee bet is there. Let's examine the situation before 100 rupees came into the picture. There is uncertainty, if you see the first point. Who will win is uncertain. What we have are only beliefs. Is uncertainty risk? No. Because one person wins or another person wins, if I've got 500 rupees in my pocket, they will remain 500 rupees. But now we have put the bet. From uncertainty, we have moved to danger. What is the danger? The danger is I may lose the bet. If that danger occurs, then you have damage. Cash in hand decreases from 500 to 400. Uncertainty, danger, damage. When these three are present, or when a potential for these three is present, when a situation in which these three are present and can happen, it is risk. It is risk. All investment is fraught with risk, but some investments have greater inherent risk than others. Risk is there everywhere. Some investments are riskier. Warren Buffett says this: risk comes from not knowing what you are doing. I started with his first saying. We'll have a lot because Warren Buffett has based his whole investment strategy on a very high degree of safety. Risk comes from not knowing what you are doing. See how very different this saying is from the concept of risk in the textbooks. As we progress through this presentation, I'll be giving you the definitions of risk by the great writers, the people who have written the investment classics, and you will see how totally different those definitions are from what we have in the textbooks. But this is a good place to start, and this can be in your mind. Risk comes from not knowing what we are doing. Risk comes from ignorance. And to understand this better, let us return to something we tackled under the post-tax rate or the tax efficiency, the real rate of return. Real rate of return, gross minus inflation minus taxation. If you have to take an example, the 10% bank fixed deposit minus, let us say that inflation is 8%, minus, if we are in the 30% tax bracket, 3%. You suddenly have a real return or real rate of return of minus 1%. Now, if you think that this is bad, let me give you something worse. Your rate of return will be, in this situation, your rate of return will be minus 1 if you reinvest your interest, not if you spend it. Understand this. Because if you spend it, the equations are totally different. If you spend what you are getting, then the inflation rate will be the damage. To expand this a little further, if interest is reinvested, you get 10 rupees, 8 rupees is inflation, 3 rupees is tax. Now 3 rupees you cannot avoid, you are paying. What remains? 7 rupees remains. 7 is reinvested, 8 is inflation. So reinvestment is plus, 8 is minus, so minus 1. Minus 8 plus 7 is minus 1. Now if you are spending it, then what happens? You get 10, the damage by inflation is 8, 3 rupees you pay as tax, 7 rupees you spend for your expenses, so the whole 10 is gone. What remains is your principal 100 and the inflation minus 8. Your 100 becomes 92, or the damage is 8%. So we think something is safe, a government bond is safe, a bank deposit is safe. When you apply the real rate of return, whether it is safe or risky is exposed. And you will be shocked to know how many millions of earners and savers and investors are unaware of this. Something is safe. It may not be safe at all. And now you go back and we have a new appreciation of what Warren Buffett said. Risk comes from not knowing what you are doing. When I don't know that a so-called safe investment is actually risky, because a lot of people are putting money in bank deposits to get the interest and use it for their normal expenses. Every year it diminishes by the rate of inflation. Some years it diminishes more, some less. 5-6 years down the line, even if interest rates are relatively stable, inflation alone will make them suddenly wake up one day and say, our income is not enough. Now what do we do? When your income is not enough, do you spend less or do you start spending from principal? That's a very good way of committing financial suicide. Especially if you have nothing else to fall back upon. And very often when there are not enough savings, ultimately the last resort is to sell your house or your apartment, move into some cheaper accommodation or into an assisted living center. What if at that time there's a sudden problem on the medical front, requiring several lakh rupees? That will further damage, especially if somebody is not covered by health insurance. So these are things that should worry us. Anything can't be labeled safe or risky. It should stand up to scrutiny. If it fails to stand up to scrutiny, and if it fails to stand up to what I call pitiless analysis, totally merciless analysis, then the label may not have any value. So we have to lift the label and see what is underneath. And like I said, we get a new appreciation of this saying, risk comes from not knowing what you are doing. The textbooks give you certain risks. I'm just mentioning them here. I'm not going to explain them because these are not the real risks of investment. Once again, I produce these only to show you the total disconnect between the kind of learning we have in this country and what exists in the practical world. They talk about the risk of intermediaries. Somebody whom you have entrusted money running away, or a corporation, like I said, fixed deposit, defaulting on inflation. Yes, everybody knows that there's inflation. Everybody knows that there can be a default by an intermediary. Business risk. Yes, business is risky. Nobody would deny that. There can be relatively riskier and relatively safer businesses. But business is risky. Interest rate risk. Interest rates change. You had a deposit of 9%, but when you renew it is 7.5%. Political risk. Policies can change, governments can fall. A new government can come that is either against the rich or against the middle class or against the poor. You never know what will happen. Market risks. These are what the textbooks tell you. Systemic and non-systemic risk, at least here there is some value. I will probably explain this in another situation, but systemic, system, a risk that affects the whole system. Example, if in the 2017 budget, the finance minister decides to increase personal income tax and corporate taxes across the board, increase. We have got 10, 20, 30 and 35% today. Let's say he is going to make everything 15, 25, 35 and 40%. Corporation tax also, that is 30% plus number of other surcharges. He is going to increase that to, let's say, 40%. All people's income and all corporate profits will come down. Whole system will be affected. The whole market will fall. Systemic risk. Non-systemic risk is risk that does not affect the whole system, but only a particular portion of the system. For example, it affects only a particular company or a particular sector or an industrial group. Satyam Computers, some years back, fraud was discovered. Other software company prices did not fall. Maybe for a day they might have fluctuated, that's all. Satyam fell drastically. Non-systemic risk affecting a particular company. A particular sector. Some new excise rate on cement industry is increased. Only the cement stocks will fall, not the rest of them. A group, there is a group, industrial group, suddenly some infighting is discovered there. The two Ambani brothers started fighting many years back. Only their shares will start falling or fluctuating. So this is systemic and non-systemic. Operating risks. Any amount of risks can be there. Loss of documents, mistakes in accounting, in taxation, and actual fraud, forgery. In the real estate market, we have seen so many cases recently where people own valuable property. They are either in some other city or in another country. Slowly it is discovered that this property is neglected. Somebody goes and from the sub-registrar's office obtains information. Who does it belong to? Where are those people? They try to make enquiry. Nobody is there. A compound wall has fallen down. There was some old tile house there. Half of it is gone. Thick grass has grown. Obvious that nobody is looking after it. Now can someone or will someone forge some documents? We have discovered cases where even an income tax PAN card was fraudulently obtained in the name of that person. The owner, in that person's name, somebody else's photograph, somebody else's proof of address. It was obtained. Then the power of attorney was forged. Total, the grantor's photo is totally different, only the name is same. Based on that, property was sold. And then by some lucky accident it was discovered. So any number of those cases. Point I'm trying to make is, whatever you saw in this slide and the previous slide, are these unknown factors? Is it unknown to us that some company may default on your fixed deposit? Is it unknown to us that some broker or somebody else may cheat you? Is it unknown to us that we have booms and recessions, economic booms and recessions and cycle? If you see all these things, every one of them is known. What is known is not risk. Risk comes, as Warren Buffett says, from the unknown or from our ignorance, from not knowing what you are doing. So we will leave these aside. Let's look at some of the definitions of risk by the great writers. Dr. William Bernstein, probably the most relevant definition of risk is the likelihood of running out of money. Look at the total difference in this. You need money, you don't have money. When you need it, you don't have it. Charles Ellis, risk is not having the money you need when you need it. An emergency occurs, I do not know where to find the money to meet this emergency. I have no emergency fund. That is risk. What are the only real investment risks according to me? The first is hype. Today, whether in financial products or elsewhere, there is a gigantic marketing machine. And this gigantic marketing machine is out to get your money by hyping things. You will have insurance people coming and saying, in the last 1 year we gave so much of return. It's not they who gave, the markets gave. Markets went up. In fact, the markets might have gone up 40%. Their return is only 25 or 30%. They will not benchmark it against the market. All this kind of unrealistic high pressure tactics used to sell general products, especially financial products. This is hype. And the other side of the coin, the moment you fall for hype, there is indiscipline. Many times I am asked, both by investment advisors as well as by sometimes my own staff, you spent so much of time with one investor, advising correctly. We know that the long-term rate of, if we go from 1979 to today, probably the stock markets are given 15% compounded annualized. But you told them, don't expect that, expect less. Whatever the inflation rate, if you are getting 2 or 3% more than that, if the inflation rate is 6%, you should be happy with stock market return of 9%. You give them that. You spend a lot of time. But later on we discover that there's somebody who came and said, what is that 9%, 10%, 12% he's talking about? We have given 30% in the last 1 year. And they go and dump their money there. 2 years later they will wake up, knowing that what kind of a product it is. I always tell them, human beings are very, very temperamental. Our duty is to give the correct advice. Beyond that, we have no duty. You can't stuff down an investment pill down anyone's throat. You have to give the correct advice. And you have to have a certain mental framework if you are a professional, any professional. You should never get overexcited or elated because somebody listened to you. At the same time, you should not get depressed that somebody did not. I had to give a particular advice. Did I give that advice correctly? Yes or no? That's the only box to be ticked. If it is yes, your job is over. Move on. Move on. There's something else. You do not have to bother about whether that person is going to take your advice or not. Very often people can't understand. Sometimes I get queries. And the real brilliant people, there are some brilliant people. Many times they are brilliant. But brilliance alone is of no use unless it is accompanied by a dash of wisdom. And by wisdom I don't mean like Albert Einstein, some flashes of brilliance. Wisdom I just mean above average common sense. At all times I'll use common sense. You keep on using common sense, the person who does that is wise. That's my definition of wisdom. Not excessive brains, no. So understanding situations, making certain changes to our outlook, controlling our own emotions and temperament, that is very important. If we don't do that, we are going to be indisciplined. And if you are indisciplined, anybody who is indisciplined cannot be a good advisor. I'm sorry, a good investor. A good investor. If you have to be a good investor, you by definition you have to be disciplined. There are people who come to me, not as youngsters in their 20s. By the time they have come to me, they are into their 40s or 50s. Many times I listen to them, have a look at what they have done throughout their lives. I find no reason for me to advise them, because without consulting an advisor, they have used common sense and they have built up their investments in a certain manner. And that is excellent. I may make one or two very, very small suggestions, but I always tell them that you have done well. In fact, a short while ago, somebody met me and said, I'm little worried about, I'm now well into my 70s. All my classmates and contemporaries are popping off one by one. I'm a little worried about, I've made a will, my wife has made a will. I'm a little worried about, have I documented things and kept things correctly? So that one thing was worrying him. Otherwise, investing and all that is fine. I said, okay, if that is worrying you, get your existing wills, get all particulars of your details about your investments, what we have with us, we know, other things you get, and phone my office and take an appointment. He took an appointment and came. When I went through it, everything was so beautifully and perfectly done. Forget about the wills. Even notes had been made where all my things are. So whoever has such a need, they have just got to read about 7 or 8 pages of nicely, neatly typed material. I told them, if this is worrying you, stop worrying right now. Most people who would have come and asked me that question, if I were to give them marks, I would give them probably 3 or 4 out of 10. You doing it on your own without anything from me, doing it on your own, I give you 9 marks out of 10. So stop about it. So immediately he said, okay, I just wanted this clarification. He just wants a clarification from someone. But without consulting someone, he has done a not above average, very, very, very well above average job of leaving notes and keeping his things in apple pie order. Similarly, this was of course in the context of succession. Similarly, there are people who make the correct investments, do them very prudently. And I am a chap who, if somebody has done something right, I am not going to try to show my intelligence or try to impress that person further. What I am going to say is, congratulations, you have done a good job, you probably don't need me, just continue doing what you are doing. Why? These people are wise investors. They are wise because they are disciplined. And in 100% of those cases, believe me, not 99% of those cases, in 100% of the cases, what do I see? I don't see brilliance. I see somebody earning, somebody controlling expenditure, ensuring that there is a surplus, saving that surplus with a fair amount of common sense. Where does the wisdom come into it? Seeing that they do not depart from the path of common sense for decades. That is wisdom. That is wisdom. So they become successful investors. They don't need people like us. Regularity, persistence, and self-discipline are the secrets of successful investment. So hype and indiscipline are what cause real damage to investment. What is hype? Hype is extravagant, intensive, unrealistic publicity promotion, or what today we loosely call marketing, especially high pressure marketing, where targets are imposed. There's a set of people, somebody slave driver in front of them, then senior slave driver. Ultimately, it goes to the board of directors, who are then answerable to the shareholders. So, this kind of mad marketing, as we call it, relies upon hype. The example I always like to give is Coke versus Pepsi. You have seen the ads, the amount of millions, billions of dollars worldwide that they pour into advertising. The point is, what are they advertising? A friend of mine once defined it as this: artificially colored, artificially flavored, aerated sugar water. Billions of dollars are poured to market these. The most humble glass of lime juice. Squeeze a lime, if you want to add a sugar or jaggery, mix it, top it with the water and drink it. Will probably be much more nutritious and healthier than what you are paying a fancy price for here. But are they telling you in their various ads, please buy and drink our artificially colored, artificially flavored, aerated sugar water? No. They'll show you some cricketer. They'll show you some film actor. If that same cricketer keeps on drinking this, the only thing that they'll not be able to do is play cricket. This is a classic case or example of hype. And the other side of the coin is, the moment you fall for hype, there is indiscipline, because hype distracts you. Hype shifts your focus from something that is of value to something that has no value. You step out of your front door at midnight, there is no power. Somebody flashes a light into your eyes. You are blinded. The only thing that you can see is that light. You are immediately not aware of anything else. You are dazzled by that light. That is hype. The problem is, something of real value may not look attractive. It is like growing a tree, a teak tree. Even to consider cutting it, 50 years may have to pass. A coconut tree, 10 years may have to pass. You can have all sorts of biotechnology and genetic engineering and God knows what else. But the best variety of mango sapling, they say 4 years, but ask any agriculturist, they'll say meaningful fruit will probably, if they say 4 years, 5 or 6 years. It requires time. And you can't take a chair there, sit and watch a mango sapling grow. Forget about a teak tree. You can't watch a mango sapling grow. But the insurance agent who comes and says 30%, immediately you sign. 2 years later, you repent. Or 3 years later, you repent. Anyway, Warren Buffett, investors should remember that excitement and expenses are their enemies. Excitement, another word for hype. Excitement and expenses are their enemies. Let us look at this one beautiful example to understand safety and the importance of safety. It's a very simple example. 2 investment opportunities. One has no risk at all, gives a return of 5%. This is how it grows. The second is, we start at the same year, 10,000 whatever is invested, but you have a 50% fall in 1 year. 10,000 declines to 5,000 in 1 year. Thereafter, it grows at 10% per annum, double this. You understood? First is no risk 5%, second is risk of 50%, but thereafter double. It takes 18 years for the 2 lines to meet. 18 years to make up. And 18 years is a very, very long time. This is only mathematics. In the investment world, once you have had this kind of a calamity, it is virtually impossible to come back. It would require serious rejigging of your whole investment strategy. That is why Warren Buffett cautions you. First rule of investment is do not lose. Second rule is do not forget the first rule. When in doubt, go for safety. Let us go to another aspect of risk. Is risk good or bad? Once again, there are 2 types of risks. One is risk that cannot be managed. Gambling. It cannot be managed. You do not know the outcome. Risk that can be managed is another type. Now, the moment risk can be managed, it should be examined, because very often such risk can be translated into reward. The moment you have some risk that can be managed, most of those risks, if you apply risk management, we can manage the risk and we can be rewarded by it. So this is very important. We are watching the Wimbledon final. Our bet is 100 rupees. No way I can manage the risk, because until 3 hours or whatever that final takes, I cannot know who's going to win. If I want to manage the risk, what should I do? I have to fix the match. Assuming I can fix the match, is it worth fixing the match for 100 rupees? In short, I cannot manage the risk. So when I cannot manage the risk, such activities better I avoid. Now, the other thing is, when we can manage, what do we do? Jason Zweig says it beautifully. Successful investing is about managing risk, not avoiding it. What should be avoided is the risk that cannot be managed. The risk that can be managed, if you manage it, it is successful investing. He puts it beautifully. Safety is enhanced by proper risk management. The good news is that management of risk in personal investment is neither complicated nor difficult.